Okay, I'm unmuted. Excellent. Thank you. Devorah, we're good for 50 minutes, 50. Okay, and you want to give me like a 10-minute warning? Is that cool?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rivaya. I'm a compulsive overeater and bulimic. Thanks for coming to the workshop. Thanks for letting me be of service because I need it, because if I live in my own head for too long, I get in trouble. So today we're going to talk about step one. So what is step one? Step one is we were powerless over alcohol or food, that our lives had become unmanageable. The verbiage of that step is sometimes confused. Many people read it as we were powerless over food because our lives had become unmanageable. That is not true. There is a dash there that connects the two ideas. We were powerless over food, that our lives had become unmanageable. In other words, one is not the cause of the other. They are correlated to each other. Our lives are unmanageable, which we then we try to control by eating compulsively, and we kick off the phenomenon of craving. We're going to get into that in a minute. But really, the point of today's workshop is for those who are struggling with the idea of if they're really powerless or not. I work with a lot of people who come to me and they tell me, I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready to do the work. And then, within a few days, they're like, I don't know if I really have this problem, or I just can't seem to get abstinent, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Usually when we can't get abstinent, it's because number one, we haven't had enough pain yet. And number two, we're not fully clear that we're powerless. I got into this program when I was 19 years old, over 20 years ago. And it took me 2 years to figure out that I really had this problem. Even though the first time I walked into a meeting and I heard someone call themselves a compulsive overeater, I was just like, ooh, that's me. I know that that's me. But it took me a long time to wrap my brain around the fact that I couldn't fix this thing myself. And there's a reason for that. And we're going to get into that today. But before I get into the actual book, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my own experience, because that way, hopefully you can relate a little bit, and maybe that'll give you some clarity about what powerlessness looks like for you. Maybe not. But in the meantime, I believe I was born a compulsive overeater. We have a video of me as a kid, not even a kid, I was a baby. I was 6 months old, sitting in a high chair between my parents, and they're eating a big container of something cold and frozen. And they just had the video camera rolling because I was the oldest. So like everything that I did was fascinating. You know how like you have your oldest child, you have like hours and hours of footage. And then by the time you get to your youngest child, it's like you don't even know that they exist because there are no pictures of them. But anyway, my parents gave me a bite of this food and I was 6 months old, okay? But you could see my eyes light up. And for the next 10 minutes on this video, all you see is me going, like asking them for more of this food. So I think I come by this thing honestly, and I think I was born with this compulsion. That said, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that I was going to get into addiction. It just meant that I had that tendency. However, it talks about in the book that we cross a line at a certain point where we lose the power of choice. I don't know if at 6 months old I had crossed that line yet, but the potential was there. By the time I was 5, I already knew something was up with me. I didn't see other kids digging, throwing out pizza crusts out of the garbage can, or eating other kids' leftovers, or stealing snacks from their lunch boxes. Like I already knew that that something weird was going on with me. But this is what I did. And I also had a lot of anxiety, and it helped. So I would, eat my food, I would eat other people's food, and then come home and eat more food all the way until I went to bed at night. And then I would sneak downstairs after bedtime, take more food, and then hide the wrappers behind my bed. So the point where when we moved out of my childhood house, we pulled the headboard away from my wall, and there was this wall of wrappers that was like 5 feet by 2 feet. And I was like, that's weird. How did that get there? Like, like totally. Over the years, the wrappers accumulate. But anyway, I was overweight. I was obese by the time I was 8 years old. And my mother, God bless her, she wanted to help. She was not trying to, control me, or this was not about her. It was really about me. I mean, listen, there's codependency. There's always a little bit about them. But my point was that she and I started going on diets together because she was trying to help. And that's what she knew how to do. The problem was that I was powerless over food. So none of these commercial diet programs worked for me. I could never lose a lot of weight. And when I did, I certainly couldn't keep it off. I mean, there was one time that I went to a commercial diet program and we bought our food for the week. And my house was like a mile from this place. And by the time I got home from this place, I had eaten all the desserts for the week. So clearly that was like not a good indicator that I was going to be successful at this. But that's how I operated. Anyway, so when I was 14, my mother and I went down to North Carolina and stayed at this, like the country's premier diet and fitness center. And, these are like the experts on weight loss. And there were like people who were willing to pay a lot of money for these people's health. And I remember sitting in this workshop one day, and the person who was leading it was talking about caloric intake versus metabolic output, which basically meant like eat less, exercise more, and you'll lose weight. Now, I was 14, right? Like I knew that when I was 9. This is not rocket science. But so I raised my hand and I said, listen, I know what you're saying. This makes sense. I get it. But what happens if there's something in my kitchen that's talking to me and I can't not eat it? So I already had this awareness that I couldn't. And so I thought, okay, these people are the experts. They're going to help me. And this person looked at me and they said, just don't eat it. And I was like, whoa, this is a multiple choice question, and just don't eat it is not one of the answers. You know, it's like A, eat it now, B, eat it later, C, eat half of it and hide the rest so my siblings don't get it, D, eat it and vomit it up. You know, there was never like not eating it was not on the table. It was not an option. It was going to be eaten. It was just a question of when and how. But that conversation really scared me because I was like, these are the guys who know all the things about this and they don't know what to do. Like, that's terrifying. So I realized then that I was on my own. And I was going to have to take care of this thing. So by the time I was 16, I became like a full-blown bulimic. I was binging and purging multiple times a day. I almost choked to death one time. And it was, I'll be honest, it totally worked for me, because while I was not going to lose weight, I had already come to terms with the fact that I was never going to be a thin person. It's like, okay, fine, I'm never going to be a thin person, but I just couldn't have the numbers keep going up. So I knew that if I binged and purged, at least I could sort of maintain a status quo. It was my plan B, and it worked. It did work. The problem was I shared a bathroom with my sister, who heard everything that was going on, and it scared her. And so she went to my mom and there was an intervention, and I was really mad. I was really mad that I was, you know, told to stop doing this, because I had found a way to literally have my cake and eat it too. But unfortunately, I had to stop temporarily until I went to college, and that's when things just got really bad for me. And the thing was, it's not like I didn't know that this was an issue. It's not like I didn't know that I had a problem. I think this is a funny thing about people who don't have this problem, or even people who don't have weight problems. Like, they'll go to people who are overweight and be like, listen, you know, if you lost weight, things would probably, you know, improve. And it's like, oh, really? That never occurred to me ever once in my life that could possibly be true. Like, as if I had never thought of it, right? Like, this is just whatever. God bless everyone. That's and their ignorance. But anyway, so by the time I was in college, I don't remember how I heard about OA, but I heard about this group of fat people who got together and talked about food. And at the time, I decided I was going to write a screenplay about the diet industry, because in my head, I was like, okay, so if I prove that the diet industry is like a scam, then everybody will forgive me for being fat. This is how I'm very crafty. So anyway, I called my mother and I said, go to one of those meetings and listen to them like my spy, be my little mole, and then call me back and tell me what they said so I can put it in my screenplay. And she was like, okay. So she went down to New Jersey. I was living in Boston, and she called me back and she said, you know, you might want to go to one of these meetings. And I was so offended. I was just like, me, it was as if she had like called me a pedophile or something, God forbid. Like, how could you say that about me? But like, okay. So I have no idea why I was willing to do it. Especially because it was February in Boston. And for those of you from the Northeast, you know that February in Boston is like the Arctic Circle, and you do not want to leave your house until like the end of May. But I saw on the internet that there was a meeting up the street from me. So I decided to go. So I went to this first meeting, and I saw these people in this room, and there were probably maybe like 12, a little more. And only 2 of them were overweight. The rest were normal looking people. And I was like, what are they, like spies? Like, what's going on here? And so I went into the meeting, and somebody identified themselves as, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a compulsive overeater. And that was when I knew that I was in the right place. I didn't totally get what everyone was talking about. First of all, no one was weighing me or selling me food, so I had no idea what was going on in here. And I saw a poster of like steps, and then I saw the word God, and I was like, nope. So, but I did know that if I said to these people, I can't not eat it, they would know what I was talking about. So I was like, okay, these are my people. I'm just going to keep coming back here. So I kept coming to meetings for like 2 years. And during that time, I had people who, I would take on a sponsor, and then they'd be like, well, maybe you want to send me your food. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, weirdo. Like, it was just, why would I tell you what I'm eating? That's so bizarre. And, I didn't quite get, I still had it ingrained in my head that I was the one who was going to figure this thing out. The problem was that I didn't understand what powerlessness meant. So what happened was, after about, I'd say like 6 months, maybe a little more, going to meetings, I ended up spending a semester in Florida and a semester in California. And by the time I got back from that second semester, I wouldn't even call it a relapse because I was never abstinent, but I had done enough research to see where this disease can take me. I lived across the street from a convenience store, and I would go to the convenience store and buy my binge foods, come home. And of course I'd called out to work because I couldn't function. And I would eat a lot of it and purge it. And I would lay on the couch so sick and promise myself, I'm never doing this again. And then 10 minutes later, I would get up and go back to the convenience store. I worked in an office in a film studio in Los Angeles, and it was in a bungalow, and in the kitchen, they had this big container of something. And every day for like 3 weeks, I would walk by, and it would be like pistols at dawn. Like, I see you over there, but I'm not going to touch you, And finally, I'm powerless. And so I went and I had some, and then the jig was up, and I just fell apart. And so that was when I realized, that's the thing about OA. Once you get in, they ruin eating for you. They really do. It's not fun anymore, because now you know what you're doing. Like, it's one thing if I don't know better and I can just go and like enjoy whatever I'm going to eat and like feel bad about it afterwards, but at least like, okay, fine. With OA, it's like, oh, come on. Now I can't even like get the fun out of this anymore. Forget it. So, now it just sucked double time. So eventually after I graduated college, I moved home, and I started going to a lot of meetings. And for some reason, something clicked with me one night. This was like probably almost a year after I graduated. And I sat in a meeting, and I was like, with people who really had what I wanted. And I was like, maybe if I do what they do, I'll have what they have. It was like A plus B equals C, pretty straightforward, but I could not get there until I got there. And that's when abstinence began for me. That was March 29th of 2004. Was that 19 years? Yeah, 19 years ago. And except for 1 3-month relapse, I have been abstinent ever since. So now I want to get into the big book, because they're going to explain powerlessness a little bit more technically than I did. I just wanted to share my experience with it, though, just in case you can relate. Okay. So if you have a copy of your big book, I invite you to open up to the doctor's opinion, because Dr. William Silkworth, gives a really interesting definition of the powerlessness that we experience. Okay. So right now I'm on page XXVII, right? Sorry, XXVI. Okay. So it says in the second paragraph, in this statement, He confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. Okay, so there's a physical factor here. Okay, the Dr. Silkworth, going to talk about how there are two factors to our powerlessness. Okay, so the first is going to be the body. And then he talks about the mind. We're going to get to the body first. Okay. Hold on one second. I'm just going to make Jules a co-host. There we go. Okay, done. Now, so that's important to know because there are two pieces, right? There's the body part and the mind part. And then I'm going to hop over to page XXVII, the next page. And Dr. Silkworth says something really important. He says, we doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultramodern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. This is a major statement by a doctor. Have you ever once in your life gone to a doctor and have them tell you, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I can't help you. Have any of you ever experienced that? Because I have not. Usually it's, I don't know we're not sure what it is. We're trying to figure out the symptoms. Take this in the meantime. Like it's never, there's nothing I can do. That's a major statement for a doctor to make, especially in the 1930s. But he's telling us that any outside power, even the medical professionals, are not going to can't help us here. So that's really important. And my experience confirmed that because I went to the experts. I went to the top of the experts. My mother paid something like $10,000 for the month for my mother and I to stay there. And I asked them and I said, what happens when I can't not eat it? And all they said was just don't eat it. So clearly this doctor knows exactly what I went through. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the big sentence in this book that everyone's heard me talk about 1,000 times, but I'm going to talk about it because it's the essence of what our addiction is. Okay. So let's go down to the bottom of page XXVII. Okay. This is to me, one of the most important paragraphs in this book. Bottom paragraph, starting with men and women. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops, and they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. Let's take this apart, okay? Men and women are drinking because they like the effect, which means that they're looking for some kind of effect, okay? What effect are they looking for? Well, it says down at the bottom, they're restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. So what the effect they're looking for here is ease and comfort. Just, it says it right here. Ease and comfort from what? Their restless irritability and discontentment. That is their default setting. This is what the doctor is saying. The default setting is restless, irritable, and discontent. They're looking for ease and comfort, and they use food to take the edge off. In and of itself, not such a big deal. Plenty of people do it. Even people who are not compulsive overeaters do this. Just go to America on Super Bowl Sunday, and you'll see it happen all the time. Okay, but that's not the issue. The issue, because it says here, they see others taking it with impunity. Not such a big deal once in a while to take the edge off with food. The problem is that we have a phenomenon of craving that develops, and we cannot stop that. The doctor uses the word allergy, okay? Uses the word allergy. And I want to discuss the word allergy because it's very important, okay? Let me just find where I have that definition. Okay, an allergy is, sorry. Okay, here we go. An allergy is a damaging immune response to a substance to which the body has become hypersensitive. Okay? Which, again, in and of itself, not a big deal. I have an allergy to goose feathers. When I sleep on a down pillow or use a down comforter, I start coughing in the middle of the night and it wakes me out of my sleep. So I don't use down pillows. The end. That's the whole story. Now, the problem would be if my brain told me that I don't have an allergy to down comforters, and I would every night keep using it and wake myself up. The allergy itself is not a problem. The fact that I'm telling myself that it's not a problem is the problem. Okay? The crux of our illness is that we have this allergy and a brain that tells us that we don't have this allergy. Okay? So our default setting, I'll say it again, our default setting is restless, irritable, and discontent. That's why, by the way, we have to work the steps. The steps are not getting rid of our allergy. We will be allergic to these substances forever, unless they come up with some funky genetic splicing that we don't know about, or some medication that hasn't been invented yet, but it doesn't exist. Once a cucumber becomes a pickle, the pickle does not go back to being a cucumber, okay? At some point, we crossed the line, and now this is who we are. There's no changing that. We're not getting rid of the allergy. What we are working on, though, is the restless, irritable, and discontent. Because if the restless, irritable, and discontent becomes that acute, we have no choice but to convince ourselves that we need the food to take the edge off. But the problem is, when we take that food in, we kick off the phenomenon of craving. Is everybody with me? You're understanding what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay, great. All right, so let's keep going. Lower down on the page, there's, it says, I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. So if you're not sure, if you're a compulsive overeater, ask yourself, can you stop when you want to? And can you stay stopped comfortably? Mark Twain has a great quote. He says, it's easy to quit smoking. I've done it 1,000 times. But can you stop staying smoking? There's a difference. So on the next page, XXX, they talk about the, this is the middle paragraph. There's a type of man. So it says, there's the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he could take a drink without danger. That is me. I had 15 years of abstinence, and I was working full time and commuting and taking I had 4 kids at home at the time, 3 of whom I was taking to school every day and being a mom and et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't have time to, go to meetings regularly. And this is before Zoom. And I also had a deep, deep resentment that I just wasn't doing the work to get rid of. And the thought crossed my mind that, I could probably try intuitive eating. And my sponsor was like, you sure? And I was like, no, it's cool. And I ended up finding another sponsor who co-signed on that. And for 3 months, I decided to intuitively eat, and I intuitively ate my way up 30 pounds. But honestly, the weight wasn't even what scared me the most. What scared me the most was that I was in the middle of a conversation with my son. He's talking to me and I realized I wasn't listening to him. I was thinking about what I was going to eat after that conversation. So I had 15 years of abstinence. I knew all the things. I had already had a spiritual experience. So clearly, this is not something that gets cured ever. I worked fast. It worked fast on me. As soon as I introduced those substances into my system, something started brewing. It took, the first night that I ate something, ate sugar, I didn't binge. But over time, this was like probably September, October, by New Year's Eve, I had a full-on binge to the point where my husband was like, I don't think that was intuitive eating. And I was like, I don't think we should be married anymore. So, we're still married though. It's okay. He still likes me. Okay. So we're on chapter 3 now, more about alcoholism. Devorah, how am I doing on time?
You have 16 minutes left and another 10 minutes. So
brilliant.
26.
Okay, great. Okay. So, on page 30, we are in the second paragraph. Okay. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. This is the idea that I would say all of us trip up on when we first get in here. No, I can't. What? You're going to tell me I can't have birthday cake on my birthday ever again? Like, no, come on. Like, I'm not that bad. It's not such a big deal. You know, I was lucky that I hit a really hard bottom at a really young age, because I've had a lot of time in recovery. I didn't have to mess around so much, but it still took me 2 years once I got in here to really buy the fact that I was not going to get better on my own. But for the most part, step one has to do with it's like research and development. I have a friend who has a market research company. And one of the things she does before she presents her report is she needs to do research into the marketplace. What's the competition? What's this? What's the projected whatever for the year? She has to do her research so that she has a clear hypothesis on how the market's going to perform. It's the same thing here. I cannot invest in these steps until I have established a clear foundation of the fact that I will not get better by myself. Because if there is even a small inkling that I think I can change this myself, or that one day it won't be like this, the steps won't work. And I know a lot of people who come to me and I take them through and they do it and then they relapse. And it's because they think, okay, well, if I work the steps and I lose some weight, then I'm fine. Or they just never really fully understood or accepted to themselves that they have this problem. Maybe there's some things I can eat. It's not such a big deal if I this, or, like, I don't need to do that. Or there are certain substances that don't really bother me, or they don't bother you now, but they might at some point. Or, one thing I always challenge people with is it's not just how it reacts in your body. How much real estate is it taking up in your mind? Are you thinking about it when you're not eating it? Are you planning on when you can eat it? Are you excited to eat it? Like as soon as your first meal is over, are you looking forward to eating it in your second meal? If it takes up any real estate in your brain besides the time when it takes to eat it, I would take a look at that. That's powerlessness too. Okay. So it says here, we are like, this is at the bottom of page 30. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. If you are an addict of any kind, there is no cure for you. I'm very sorry to tell you this. You will always be an addict forever and ever. There's nothing, at this point, science has not done anything to help with this. So if you are one, that's what you are. Now, a lot of us don't want to be one because number one, it's inconvenient. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of other things I could be doing right now. But like, here we are. Nobody wants to do this kind of work. Two, we don't want to be different. I've already felt different my whole life. Now I'm even more different. Nobody wants this. Like, nobody wants to deal with this. Nobody comes to OA and is like, hooray. Like it doesn't happen. So, but I'm doing you a favor by telling you that if you are one of these things, it's not going to get better for you. You can go. You can sign off this meeting and go out there and pretend OA doesn't exist. And I promise you there is no solution out there and it's just going to get worse. So, vaya con Dios. But in other words, there's nothing you can do on your own power to fix this. And it says here on page 31, we've tried every imaginable remedy. Okay. And on another page, they talk about, making an oath and taking trips, and I only drank natural and I only did this. So I'm going to speak for myself here only, but I bet if you're here that you can relate with this, you've probably done some pretty wacky shit to get yourself to not eat compulsively. I know people who got staples in their ears and got their jaws wired shut and spent thousands of dollars on therapy, or starved themselves, or took laxatives, or spent hours in the gym, or blah, 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 blah. The list goes on of all the things that we did to make ourselves be able to eat like normal people. If you're sitting here, they didn't work. Because if they did, you would have no need to be here. But what they're saying is you can try all those things. We tried all those things. None of them worked because we are addicts. We are compulsive eaters. If you're a compulsive overeater, those things are not going to work for you. And this is good because it's empirical evidence that you can use to prove to yourself that this is the thing. Okay. If you have done A and it did not work, if you have done B and it did not work, and C and D ad infinitum, you are probably an addict. Sometimes we have to look back at the past as proof of what we're actually doing here. When people come to me and they tell me I can't get abstinent yet, I'll tell them, well, I guess you haven't done enough research. I guess you're not in enough pain yet. I was very lucky that I got in enough pain at a young age, but sometimes it just isn't there yet. So if you're not sure if you're powerless, ask for clarity on that. Ask for enough pain. God willing, you're not. You can go and live the rest of your life and do whatever you want. That's lovely. I'm jealous of you, but I'm actually not, because I get to, have a life beyond my wildest dreams. Okay. Yeah. So on page 32, right? This is the bottom paragraph. He fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. So again, it doesn't matter how long you've been abstinent. It doesn't matter how much weight you've lost. I know people who have lost and gained 100 pounds numerous times, and it doesn't mean anything. I know somebody who got major surgery on their body and they lost a lot of weight, and then they took off whatever was on their stomach and weight came right back on. It feels like an easier, softer way, but it's not, because we're putting a Band-Aid on cancer. We need spiritual chemotherapy. Okay, let's keep looking. Okay, so now we're on page 33. Now we're getting into the interesting part, okay? Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Okay, some of us have to be honest with ourselves that there is something to be gained from eating compulsively. Number one, there is a lot of responsibility that you can avoid. Number two, there's a lot of pain you can avoid. And three, there's a lot of hard work that you can avoid. I know a lot of people who are compulsive overeaters and will probably remain in their addiction for the rest of their lives. These people know me very well. They could pick up the phone and call me anytime they want. They're not going to do it because they don't actually want to get better. I don't say that with judgment, by the way, because there are plenty of times I didn't really want to get better. I thought I wanted to get better, but what I really wanted was to eat compulsively without the consequences. There's a difference, okay? There has to come a point where we're willing to trade the ease and comfort of eating for the pain and struggle of recovery. It doesn't sound fun, but you have to be willing to let go to make space for the other. And a lot of people just aren't. I would say of all the compulsive overeaters on the planet, maybe 1% are actually in the rooms. And maybe 10% of that are people who are abstinent and working your program. Because it's easier to just stay sick. It just is. And I don't say that with judgment. It's just easier to stay sick. And the peculiar mental twist. Well, what peculiar mental twist are they talking about? So we're gonna look at the story in a second, but the peculiar mental twist, just in a nutshell, is your brain telling you that you're not a compulsive overeater, or that this time it's not such a big deal. Okay, so we're gonna look at the story of Jim because it's one of my favorites in this book. Okay, so we're on page 35. Okay, our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. So let's talk about this for a minute, okay? He inherited a highly functional business, which means he came from money. Okay, so he had resources. He had financial resources. He was a good salesman, which means he was charming. He was well liked. He had a nervous disposition, though, which means that we've got some fear and anxiety going on there, right? He also had a commendable World War record, which in those days was actually a big deal. If somebody was well known to have performed well in one of the wars, it was a very respectable thing. It was a cool thing, It was like an Instagram influencer, but not. But for an actual good reason. Anyway, we told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, which means great fear or shock, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection. So let's think about this, right? He went to AA. He had people who told him that he had this problem. He agreed with them that he had this problem, and he knew what was at risk if he drank. Now let's go to the next page. Yet he got drunk again. What's that about? Because he knows all the facts. He's aware that when he drinks, he gets in trouble. He knows that he could lose his job. He lost his company already. He could lose his family. He could lose his livelihood. He could lose his reputation. He knows what's at stake. And yet, there he goes. So the issue is not the fact that he's an alcoholic. The issue is the fact that he convinces himself that he's not. So let's see this story, okay? We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This story makes me laugh, by the way, because Jim is totally full of crap. We're going to talk about it, okay? This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. Where was he on Monday? Just question, okay? I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. Okay, guys, imagine you have a business that's doing really well, and your compulsive overeating messes your life up so much that you're forced to sell it. But after you get sober, the people who bought the business from you do you a solid and hire you as a salesman in the company that you used to own. Is irritated the word that you would use to describe how you felt about that? I don't know about you, but I would be fucking pissed, okay? My pride, I would be so resentful that I had to do that, and so humiliated and so ashamed. Like, don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I did for this company? Irritated? Come on, all right? I had a few words with the boss, okay? That's a euphemism if I ever heard one. Euphemism with the boss. The boss was probably like, dude, where were you on Tuesday? And he was probably like, I used to own this company, okay? This used to be my company. I don't need to come in on Monday if I don't have to, okay? A few words, let's get serious. But nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I might get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. Okay, so I'm going to go to this place that I know has a bar and tell myself that I'm just getting some lunch, and maybe I'll even find a customer there. Have you ever done anything like that? I just need to go to the grocery store because the kids are running low on snacks, and like I know sometimes they have friends coming over, and I just need to make sure the pantry's stocked because blah, 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 blah. Okay? I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Okay? The most dishonest word in this whole story is the word suddenly. Okay? Because he set that whole thing up. It was no accident that he happened to be sitting at that bar at that time and go, oh, maybe I should put some whiskey in my milk. He took himself to a place with a bar where he knew there would be alcohol and then was surprised when he decided to drink. You sit in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut, guys. That's how it works. Okay? The problem was not that he was an alcoholic because that he didn't know, because he already knew. We know this. He went to AA already. The problem was that he was pissed off, restless. His pride was hurt. He was full of fear. So he justified to himself that he could go and drink alcohol. And we know what happened. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Okay? At the bottom of the page, he had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. That is the crux of addiction, okay? It's not that we don't know. We all know, but we still think that we can beat the game. We still think that, oh, it's okay. This time it's going to be fine, okay? And we have empirical evidence that this time it's not going to be fine. And until we hit that moment where we go, oh shit, it's never going to be fine, then we're ready to take step one, okay? Are we clear on this? I'm making sense? Okay, great. So let's keep going. Yep, page 39, it says the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. Okay? We can know better. We can even want to do better, and we still can't stop. That's the scary part, because there were times where I would cry. I would wake up in the morning and cry because I didn't want to eat compulsively, and I knew I would anyway. That's terrifying. Because even the deepest desire to want to stop will still not stop me. Okay. Now we're going to talk about Fred. Okay.
Ravaya, that's it's been 40 minutes, so 10 more minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So we're going to talk about Fred now. Fred was stable, well-balanced. This is page 39. Fred's a dapper Dan, if you know what I mean. They sent him to Washington. Really, swell guy, whatever. So he saw that he was having some issues. So he decided to make up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. So now we're on page 40. Okay. He met some of the AA guys and they told him about what was going on, but he thought he could do it himself. So now we're on page 40. Okay. He decided self-knowledge would fix it. Second paragraph. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told us is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. So this is no fool, okay? This is a really successful guy who gets sent on business trips wherever, and knows better and still cannot stop himself, okay? Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. The subtle insanity he's talking about is that little voice that tells us this time it's going to be fine. We have the this time it's going to be fine. We take in the substance, and then we kick off the phenomenon of craving, and then our choice is out the window. Game over. As soon as we take the first bite, the game is over. That's, again, the bite is not the issue. It's the voice telling us that the bite is not going to be a problem. Okay. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, right? I'm not 300 pounds, or I've never had to go to a hospital, or I've never had to get surgery. I'm not as bad as they are. That I've been usually successful in looking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would only be a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. Okay, so he has a plan in his mind. He's not going to do it today. He's not going to drink. He's cool. Okay, page 41, second paragraph. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail in my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxicab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time, I had not thought of the consequences at all. Skip a few lines. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come, I would drink again. Okay? There's something very, very important about that sentence. They're not saying that if you have an alcoholic body, you will drink again. I have an alcoholic body right now, and I'm not drinking. I'm a compulsive overeater. I'm not eating today. That's not my problem. If I have an alcoholic mind, the time and place will come. I will drink again. In other words, if I do not have a spiritual experience, my mind will, no matter how much evidence I have, will convince me at a certain point that I can eat again like a normal person. That is the essence of powerlessness. Okay. I am powerless over my mind's ability to convince me that I do not have a problem, even though it's totally obvious that I have a problem. And so when they use the word insanity, they're dead right. Because insanity means that you're looking at a reality that is different from reality. We can convince ourselves of a complete fantasy, despite the fact that we have evidence in front of us. You know, God forbid, you know, somebody who's in a relationship with someone who's abusive. Every time they do something like this and they come to you and say, you know, it's just because of this, and this, and they're going to be fine. So I'm just going to go back to them. And you're like, oh my God, like, you know what they're going to do. It's the same thing. You know, I always say like compulsive overeating is like an abusive boyfriend. Like it hurts so good and I can't stop going back. You know what I mean? But eventually it comes to the point where I'm like, I just don't want to get the shit kicked out of me anymore. But you have to have enough pain to be willing to do that and to acknowledge that it's not just the food. The food is not the problem. My mind is the problem. My restless, irritable, and discontent is the problem. We're going to get to that soon. Okay. And now the last thing I want to talk about, and very, very briefly, because I want to get into the life being unmanageable part. Okay. Because now I think I've made a pretty clear case for what powerlessness over food looks like, right? We've talked about the allergy. Now I want to talk about powerlessness over our lives, right? Our lives have become unmanageable. So the issue here is not that we are eating compulsively because our lives are unmanageable. I'm sorry, our lives are not unmanageable because we're eating compulsively. We can't manage our own lives, and we medicate ourselves by eating compulsively, which causes even more problems. And so the issue is not food, it's our lives. We don't know how to live. And so on page 52, they describe the bedevilments that I'm just going to read through, because this is an explanation of what our lives look like. Okay. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? So let's talk about that. When they describe this, they're not talking about life when you're drinking. They're talking about life when you're not drinking. This is what we have to live with. We feel restless, irritable, and discontent all the time. And life is very difficult when we're trying to manage it ourselves. There's always some kind of problem happening when we try to manage our lives by ourselves. And it becomes too difficult. And so we have no choice but to eat compulsively, even though we know it will kill us, but our brains tell us it's fine. So do you see how the odds are stacked against us here? We create a situation that is untenable. You know, if I move into an apartment and I never clean it and I leave food all over the place and rats come in and it's disgusting, and then I start eating compulsively because I have a disgusting apartment, the issue is not the food. The issue is that I haven't taken care of my apartment. So I have two choices. I can keep eating and ignore the apartment, or I can clean the place or move out. But for most of us, we're stuck in, well, I just have this food problem. When really you take the food away and you look around and you go, oh my God, I'm living in hell. But most people don't want to see that. And it's just easier to stay in compulsive overeating. Okay? So we have a two-pronged problem here. We have the and I'm going to say it again. I've said it 100 times, but I don't care because this is how I'm going to get the point across. You have an allergy. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're just here for fun. You have an allergy. Okay. Now, in and of itself, not a big deal. I'm allergic to down comforters. My aunt's allergic to strawberries. My sister-in-law is allergic to penicillin. Allergies, not a big deal. It's 2023. Everybody's fine. Not an issue. But what if my aunt needed an entire book to convince her not to eat strawberries? The problem's not the strawberries. The problem is that she keeps telling herself that she can eat it. Because if these people who wrote this book could just stop drinking because they realized it was a problem, they wouldn't have needed an entire book and they wouldn't have needed to create a fellowship. They would have just stopped. But they didn't, because they have a mind that tells them that they're fine. And even more than that, they have a lack of tools in their toolkit to help them live in a comfortable way, because their default setting is restless, irritable, discontent. They don't know how to interact with people. They create problems in their own lives. And then because it's so uncomfortable, they're just like, screw it, I'll just drink, even though I know what's going to happen to me. And they point to the consequences of their drinking as the real problem, when really they created those consequences because they didn't want to deal with actual life. So to me, that's the essence of powerlessness. And I hope that I've made a pretty clear argument. I hope you have some clarity. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say as well.